natural way.
Right, thanks everybody for attending the meeting tonight. I shall deal with hopefully the items in order. Evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lift. Once outside the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door in which you enter the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please let yourself known to a member of the staff. Please also make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. And I'd like to advise everybody that this meeting or part of it will be recorded for a future broadcast. Okay? Item number 2, apologies. I have several apologies. Councillor Tandy, Sub-Councillor Ridcombe, Councillor Walmsley, Sub-Councillor Evans, Councillor Doughty, Sub-Councillor Longdon, Councillor Grant, Sub-Councillor Pandar, Mrs Lee, and D Ross, apologies, and also apologies for Lynn. The minutes on 12th of September 2019, can I sign them as a true record? Great. Okay. Any declarations of interest or party whip?
Two non-peculiar interests. One, I actually do the park run round bed of Lions Welfare Park most Saturdays, so I've got an interest obviously in what's going on in the park. And secondly, I discussed and told the Department for Education that I was interested in making a bid for Way 14, but did not make a bid, so which is referred to in number 8.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? No. Good. Right, public consultation. We have going to have 2 speakers tonight. Mrs. Condacor, she expected to turn up or?
She's sitting there.
Sorry, I couldn't see you behind back.
Not that big now.
I shall blame Barry rather than my side, and Councillor Hancock. What I intend to do is, I understand that the SLM annual report was only going to take about 10 minutes for the presentation. he said I could do it 10 minutes, so 10 minutes and 10 minutes there. And if that's the case, I would like to take that and then the later developing options afterwards, because I believe the later options, developing options, is going to take a bit longer than 10 minutes, because this is going to be 20 to 30 years for the borough's leisure provision, touch and wood and everything else. But we can just do this very, very quickly. The local tax support scheme actually went to the Cabinet last night, and everybody's had a copy of that. The main changes, I understand, is resolved that under B, the minimal contribution required is going to go from 20% to 50%, and the technical changes set out in 5.2 of the document be approved, and the resident costs are set out in the report. So we've got one speaker on that. Mr. Condacor, would you like to speak on that subject?
Well, I just wanted to say I'm in support of it being reduced to 15%, because
anything you can do to help those who are struggling to pay, has got to be done, because otherwise you just compound their problems. So I'm pleased that it has been, it's going to be reduced, because it, makes absolute sense, particularly as the borough's contribution to that is only 13%. The rest comes from the, county and what have you. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any panel member with any clarification points for Mr. Condacor? No. Any panel members wish to say something on council tax support? Councillor Condacor.
Yeah, I've been campaigning for this for a very long while, because the different districts in Warwickshire and Coventry have different levels of support, which is a bit of a postcode lottery if you're poor and in a low paid job, to where you live, whether you get 20% minimum payment or 8% minimum payment. And I think when these schemes were introduced, some of the richer boroughs would actually pay all your council tax if you're on a very low wage, whereas obviously in Eton and Bedworth they always had to pay 20%. So I really welcome this change to 15%. It may not sound a lot, but actually in terms of their payments, they actually go down by a quarter. So if you were paying £200 a year, so you had say you had a £1,000 council tax bill, and you're on a very low income, or you're ill or couldn't work, you were expected to pay £200 a year of that £1,000 bill. You are now expected to pay £150 for it. So it is literally putting £1 or so in people's pockets every week. It's very targeted, because obviously the people who are only on 50% council tax relief, it had no effect on at all. It actually targeted those who always had the almost maximum council tax relief. So it's a really good move. It will cost us £29,000 to give £250,000 benefit. So say we only pay 13% of it. And I believe we will have less homeless people as a result. We'll have less people at food banks, and actually we could very easily recover that £29,000 by actually having less poor people in debt, because it's always so hard to get that extra £50 a year from people who've got least money. So I think it's a positive all the way round, and it'd be really good if in future we can get it down to zero, and zero everywhere, so we don't have this postcode lottery. But I'm really pleased we've done it. We should have done it 4 years ago, but it's at least a good step.
Any other panel member? No, so we should welcome the decision by the Cabinet yesterday, and at least it's a step in the right direction. Yep. Okay, thank you. Right, SLM report. Simon or?
Thank you, Chair. I think if
We're moving. I'll move.
we do very shortly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have 10 minutes, so I will try and make it as concise as possible. I'll just go through the first page. What we've endeavoured to do is provide you as many statistics as possible across the whole of the contract. The first slide that we come to is the figures, that's the usage statistics. That's the full operational year last year, April to March. And currently where we're currently tracking the next quarter's information is due to be submitted September, October, November, at the end of November. The same with Bedworth. And then, sorry, Jubilee. And then through to Etang. The challenges, we are facing challenges. There is no hiding from the impact of the private operator Purgem in town, and people's choice of leisure choices currently across the borough. But overall, we would expect not to see a significant reduction year on year. There will be a reduction potentially up to 2 to 3%, which sounds significant, but we are trying to counter that in other elements of our outreach and activity. Next area, customer comments. They demonstrate the areas that we assess within our centres: reception, changing activity, food and beverage and colleague, against the target percentage of 85%. That is about industry standard, and then you look at how we are comparing those across Pingles with the amount of comments. Next one is Bedworth, and then Jubilee and Eton. We have absolutely got challenges with people's expectation. Performance-wise, we do still have the continued challenges at Bedworth with the producing the change rooms. They're clearly part of the leisure strategy to look at how that is. But overall, our percentage year on year is improving, and I feel the government would support us in saying that we are going in the right direction with regards to service standards. We now have, and have had now for 2 years, our single customer view. That enables us to look at social media platforms such as Facebook and Google Review. We're now able to provide for the first time how Pingles, Bedworth, Jubilee and Eton are scored on their Google Review. And again, on Facebook, yes, Facebook requires that interaction from people to actually have liked your page and already be aligned to your page. But again, at this moment in time, I'm unable to tell you whereabouts that falls within industry, because not many organisations are doing it. And year on year, this will be our first point of benchmark. So again, this will be enables us to report year on year on how we're comparing on our Google reviews and our Facebook reviews. The main change that obviously you'll be able to see this year is our external quality assessment. We've had Quest assess all of our centres now. Pingles and Bedworth have went in for Quest Plus because of the nature of their operation. They both had 2-day assessments and they've achieved very good. Jubilee and Eton, again because of their size of operation, had a single-day assessment and they achieved good. That is the good is in the top quartile of their ability to achieve that across a single day, and the very good is again just one down from outstanding for the 2-day assessment. The overview on the quality feedback from those with the strengths were health and safety management, our swim lesson delivery, our ability business planning, our training and development of our colleagues, our customer service and experience, cleaning and housekeeping, maintenance equipment, areas of improvement, partnership working with the local agencies. That wasn't directed at the authority, they were local organisations, more directly with, be those partnerships in the more community areas. Yes, absolutely, we know that facilities are ageing in place, therefore maintenance general upkeep of the tends to be challenging. But again, that's why you've got the presentation by Kevin this afternoon. As an organisation, we've recently received 3 awards. The Insight Award for the UK Active, that was how we are developing our interactive side of it. Digital transformation, that was again our existing digital platforms and how they're becoming more aligned. And our Children's Award, the Kids Award, was how we are now delivering children's activities across the whole of our estate. And again, to be a UK Active Awards winner was a very prestigious award for the organisation to achieve. Activity highlights, as we do year on year. Swimming lessons at Pingles has remained, and Pingles is now the largest delivery of swimming lessons in the East region. For 2016, I would expect that now. Well, I know now that is over 2,200 now. So we're seeing a consistent growth for Pingles. Bedworth is slightly higher than that, and I expect Bedworth to break 2,000 potentially by the end of November. So again, swimming lessons remain very, very popular within the district. It's a very pleasing performance for us. A slightly less rosy picture is our health and fitness. The local competition with Pure Gym continues to have a detrimental effect on Pingles year on year. Again, Bedworth, we are seeing that we're managing to resist some of the influx which is going across some of the Coventry sites, and Jubilee is about where the market would expect it to be with the local competition again in Nuneaton. A lot of the developments that you'll see on the next few slides are how we're looking to engage with different areas of the community. We now have interactive family sessions at our pools now, which is aligned to being Disney themed sessions, so they are now Disney themed sessions. The next one is again a partnership with Max Whitlock, our award or Olympic athlete. He's now an ambassador for us as across our business, and we're delivering all of our gymnastics courses through himself. We then have, again, far more social media, how we're engaging with the customer. We now have Summers of the Month posted online. We have newsletters sent out to all our customers. So we're now trying to engage far more with our customers across social media platforms, and that's far more interactive and gets us far more a high level of response now. Community, we're working an awful lot with the authority and specifically targeting particular areas now. One of those ones is health and welfare. We've mainly picked up on the Alzheimer's one. The next one that when Wendy will click on again is our Macmillan support. Macmillan are our charity for the next 2 years. We're looking to raise £1.4 million for them over 2 years. We've currently raised 410,000 in the first 3 months of our partnership with them. And again, it's how we're interacting with our community now to try and raise awareness, and obviously some very, very worthwhile charities that we're partnering now. We're also very aware of the need to understand, is there a need for our colleagues to drive to work when they may live in the town that they work, and we're trying to drive them to consider whether they actually do drive to work, whether they use bikes or walk to work. I'm not one of the fortunate people that can say walk to work at the moment with the miles I do, but a lot of our colleagues can do that, and we're trying to raise their awareness and wherever they can to raise money again for Macmillan as an added incentive for them. One very important, obviously, for the authority and us as a partnership is the Passport to Performance and how that's linking in with our Sporting Champions scheme. You'll see in the corner there, Colin Jackson, who is our ambassador. We have got 4 very high-profile Passport to Performance and Sporting Champions locally. They are hopefully attending one of our national launches on the 23rd in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, where they have a chance to, again, meet several Olympic athletes, gain some different workshops on healthy eating, how to access different levels of funding. And again, as a Passport to Performance, we also provide some direct funding and support to those athletes locally. Passport to Leisure, you can see how the work that's being utilised across the community now with our Community Engagement Manager. There's an awful lot of work now being done, if Wendy shows the next slide, on how we are now engaging in the different wards, which was raised at the last meeting, of how we're accessing that. And an awful lot of work has been done with local partners and local councils to actually identify which wards were a high priority, and again, in partnership with the authority and our Community Engagement Manager Dave now, certainly become far more of a higher priority, and we continue to see a very good uptake on Passport to Leisure. Funding, that's just to provide some evidence provided by the Active Community Manager where we've received some funding. The residents of Hilltop and Colwell use Everyone Access Centre free for 6 months. You know, funding is becoming increasingly difficult for us to access, but again, being able to receive the 3,000 and do some localised funding ourselves, and then we will support those at no cost to our business. Sorry, no cost to the customers, to our business. Again, that is a fantastic opportunity, and I say a lot of the wards now are being given these different opportunities. So I'm afraid that was a whistle stop. Chair, I don't know if I made 10 minutes. I might have just gone over about 12, but
I never heard Wendy's quote go off, so that's all right. Right, thanks for that presentation. A public speaker, Mr. Condacor.
There's just a couple of questions I have and a couple of comments really. On the customer comments, what does F&B stand for?
food and beverage.
I wondered whether it was, but it just seemed a bit surprising that there are only like 5 and 1 for Bedworth, and there was even some for Eton. Well, as far as I'm aware, they've only got a machine. So,
Nice machine.
is there any reason why Pingles and Bedworth usage in April and June was so much lower than the previous year? Because it just seemed a thing, didn't it?
April was because of where Easter fell previous year, and June just a decline in usage.
I was a bit concerned on this thing about Pingles in that it said satisfaction for the changing area in particular has been challenging due to the ageing facilities. Now, I know I think it was said 2002 for Pingles, but to me, I still think of Pingles as being a new place, and certainly compared to Bedworth it is. So I think that's a bit suspect to say it's an ageing facility. I mean, everything is ageing, obviously, as we all are. Is there anything that you're doing with Nuneaton and Bedworth Council regarding Pure Gym? Because I understand that we're also losing out on the parking at Road Walk with them. So I think there's a sort of two-pronged sort of issue there. In terms of this communication thing about sort of a Go Green Day, well, that passed me by altogether, but it doesn't really affect me in that I invariably do cycle there anyway. And that brings me on to the cycle racks provision is not really adequate. At Pingles, they're usually full, at least you've got the railings there, and Bedworth, it's completely dreadful. I would never leave my bike up on the racks at Bedworth because they're completely out of view and useless, absolutely useless. So if you want to encourage people to come by their own steam, you need to up that, particularly at Bedworth, please.
Okay, is that out?
I think
So,
already, yeah.
okay, thanks. Any point of clarification from the panel, Mrs. Quandicar?
Yeah.
Councillor?
Can you define useless, please, or use of the bike racks? What do you mean, please?
You need the bike racks, for example, here by the council
Yeah.
outside, I think you have the bike rack that way. They've been installed so they're actually parallel to the thing, so you can actually only use one side of
Yeah,
them.
I have seen them.
And they're completely round the corner. And for safe, if you value your bicycle, you want it to be somewhere where it's actually visible. Because where they are at Bedworth Leisure Centre, there's only 2 of them. I think I'm right in saying it's been a while since I've been round to look at it. But there's only 2 or 3. You can only use one side of them, so that's only 2 or 3 bicycles. And I'd be very, scared about leaving my bike on them because anyone could be cutting away your locks, and there's no CCTV. They're completely out of sight, and therefore, not up to spec.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Any members of the panel wish to discuss this? Councillor Quandicar?
Yeah, I'm very interested in Go Green and comment about even using buses, because actually buses are actually a massive opportunity, and we have a very good bus service going past the Bedworth Leisure Centre, because it's on the every 10-minute route to Coventry, very good accessibility by bus, and it's no distance from the bus stop. The Pingles is the opposite. It has absolutely no connectivity to a local bus service. You have to walk through the park, or the bus routes are quite a long way off, and particularly for off-peak times, I don't know if you could actually talk to Stagecoach, not about diverting a peak hour bus service, which are very tight, but in the middle of the day and at weekends, actually directing some bus services to the Pingles, particularly because we've got low car ownership. I think one of these things later on says some areas have 30% of families have no car at all, and they are people who we need to get as customers. And the other thing, yet again on the Pure Gym, there are people who park, particularly in the evenings, right next to the door outside Pure Gym virtually. I mean, it's how unfit some people are, but it does seem to be a problem giving them an incentive of free car parking at Pure Gym. And in a real world with competition rules, you think, well, why is the council giving so much value to Pure Gym and not our own operator? So It annoys me that people don't actually cycle to the gym. I just leave those 2 points to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, Elliott?
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to ask you a little bit about your last point, the sensory sessions. Could you just tell me a little bit about that, please?
The
The very last sentence, sensory sessions with active ants. On the funding page.
Unfortunately, I don't know a great deal about it. It was one of our active community managers has done it. So what I know is that what Liam's tried to do is try and undertake an awful lot of, should we say, more diverse activities, particularly in Jubilee and Eto, because of the nature of those facilities aren't highly used. I will find some information out and forward it to some more detail on those.
Because I know it already happens at the Jubilee, so
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Anybody else? Councillor?
All right. One of the things I noticed, some of the figures are wrong on the Pingles leisure and the Bedworth leisure. So you actually had 225,000 people, and it was down 12,292. On the Jubilee and the E10, it's actually gone up. If you call it usage or footfall. Was there a reason that's gone up there, and then is it just trying to get people into the other bigger establishments, or is it, have you shifted some of the?
No, I think there's an element of honesty, Chair, that there's a different manager in those sites, has been for last for a period of time now, which has now probably generated a little bit more focus on those sites. I think our ability to track usage has now been a little bit clearer on how we're tracking that. I'm not saying previously it wasn't accurate, but I think we've actually now tracked all user groups. I think there's certainly been an uptake in certain off-peak usage in Jubilee. Certainly now we've seen an awful lot more, even just general meeting and table tennis usage in that site. So I think generally it is an uptake in that.
Any other member for the panel? No? Well, thanks for coming in.
Chair.
Sorry.
I was hoping to get a response if you've asked the bus service about better services at Pingles.
No, I would, if I was a betting man, I would hardly think the Stagecoach would probably laugh at me as soon as I asked them to redirect a bus service. They would have to have, I think, the return on that rerouting. I can ask them, absolutely we'll ask them, but I would think they would be highly unlikely to change a bus route upon our request. But as a partnership, I've got no issue with putting it to them to see if they would consider, at least if it was an alternative, maybe every other hour. Absolutely, it's clear it would be a benefit to the site, as Pingles, to get a more direct bus service. Absolutely.
With that assurance, can we welcome the report and thank you for
Chair.
Right, we're on to item number 8 then, the leisure development options. Kevin, you're going to present this. I understand Rachel Sutcliffe is from FLL and Janet Neal's here from Warwickshire County Council.
That's correct.
I think that might be part of the things that might be mentioned in the report, so we can open in a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. What I intending to do, I was going to run through the summary report, and then I've got some notes on the appendix, which I'll then refer to pages to try and help. I appreciate there's a lot of detail in there, so I'll try and go through the summary reports in the 55-page coloured document, but refer to pages along the way. This report provides information on 3 leisure development proposals, including destination parks concept planning, which I'll come on to, and I appreciate some detail in your packs. That refers to the destination parks, refers to the Miners Welfare Park and Riversley Park, and that's in order to provide a strategic vision for both leisure and open space facilities. The outcome from tonight's presentation is being asked to refer back to the Cabinet Member for Arts and Leisure, where a further report will be presented to Cabinet in the near future. As the Chair mentioned, I have to my right Rachel Sutcliffe from Strategic Leisure and Janet Neal from Warwickshire County Council. Just to give some background, in 2016 the Borough Council, working with Strategic Leisure Limited, undertook to complete a leisure facility strategy and a playing pitch strategy. That was externally consulted upon Sport England, local clubs, etc., and that provided a medium to long-term planning document for the council. These two documents also form part of the local plan and were consulted upon by Sport England, NGBs, national governing bodies. In January 2017, that information was adopted at a cabinet meeting, and that allowed the Borough Council to then seek contributions and negotiations with housing developers in order for Section 106. That was based upon the evidence in those adopted strategies, that leisure and the playing pitch strategy. That provided with what the current status was in the borough in terms of capacity, facilities, and what was needed going forward to 2031 based upon the draft local plan at that stage. In 2018, it was approximately 14,000 houses, dwellings were built by 2031. Based upon that figure, the calculations for potential Section 106 for the facilities in this report, circa 9 million could be collected on Section 106. However, I just want to point out there's a bit of a health warning on that, because unless the development is undertaken, unless those sites are viable by the developers, and that money will only come in when the site is part developed and then full developed by the developer. So it's not a guarantee. It's only when those sites are completely finished, signed off by ourselves as planning authority. Following the adoption of the leisure development plan in January 17, prior to that there was some work with a members working group which discussed the findings from that leisure strategy, the capacity levels, and identified in order of preference the 5 priority areas for the authority to look forward to. Those 5 areas are identified in section 4.4 of the report, which identified wet facilities, swimming pool was a first priority, sports facilities, community facilities, hub sites, cycling, and then athletics. On the 11th of April, Cabinet approved a report recommending, following the outcome of the cross-party members working group, that further work be developed around high-level collection of contributions and also the capacity at leisure sites. As part of that Cabinet report, that identified 4 projects that I'll come on to in this report. Just to further stress for the Section 106, the potential contributions are earmarked for the specific projects identified in the local plan and the IDP. At that stage, we identified what those capacity levels were and what that required in terms of us meeting the shortfall for the new dwellings coming into the borough. At that time, because there was a change in the modification order in terms of additional houses, we were looking at 10,500 houses. So section 4.6 just verifies what we were looking at that stage when it was 10,500 houses. So we had a shortfall of 4 lanes, 25 metres at the Pingles Leisure Centre. We were looking at options for the Bedworth Leisure Centre to include a further 2 lanes of swimming pool. Options for working with Warwickshire County Council and the proposed new secondary school in Northern and Eton, and also consider a fallback option B if this new school did not come to fruition. The current position in terms of section 5 details that we've continued to work with Strategic Leisure and Warwickshire County Council in developing these options. Appendix A, the coloured document, provides the strategic outcomes that we've been working with, which are focused around Sport England's proposals and their main model that they request all local authorities if you would like to seek any potential funding from Sport England, but also as a model of good practice in terms of looking at your strategic need. Ongoing discussions have been held with a number of partners, Warwickshire County Council, Sport England, Birmingham County Football Association, Football Foundation, and local sports and clubs in pulling that evidence and data together. Section 6 of the report just clarifies where we are in terms of due diligence. The council have made a real point of working with Sport England because they are the experts in delivering model new local leisure facilities. So they build leisure centres and support leisure facilities month in, month out across the country. So what we have been doing is a very high level concept stage. We've been developing plans with our own consultants, design team, and that work has been fed back to Sport England for them to look at that in terms of due diligence, to look at the cost, what we are identifying, and their internal and external consultants for quantity surveyor and financial modelling have also been looking at that and have fed back to us on what their thoughts are on what we've produced. And we've had feedback from Sport England on that, just to ensure that our final proposals, our high level final proposals that you've got in front of you tonight, demonstrate best value for the council. I'm very conscious that projects of this nature can be estimated and we can pull a figure out of the air, but we have not done that. We have been working with strategic partners and then also sought advice from Sport England, who obviously, as I said, undertake these buildings and support these across the country. The Section 7 identifies what the Appendix A in terms of the options are based upon. 7.1 for the Bedworth Leisure Centre, a bit of background, the facility was built in 1975, has had some modifications over a number of years, including an extension to the health and fitness facilities, squash courts, new roof windows, etc. Again, Sport England's advice is leisure centres approximately last between 40 and 50 years, depending on how they're maintained, the usage, the age of the building, the design at that time. Bedworth was built in 1975, so we've had some very good usage out of it. It's still a very good facility, and as you walk through the door, very nice, clean, well-used building. It's what you don't see in terms of the M&E, the mechanical engineering underneath, that gets to a point where it's obsolete, the filters, the pool tank, etc. Also the efficiency and the sustainability of a site, and the previous report that was mentioned, people's expectations are a lot different these days in terms of what they're looking for in terms of modern facilities, their expectations in terms of changing rooms, lockers. It's not a male and female changing anymore, it's a changing village, so parents, children can all go together and sort of things along that nature. Things have moved on since 1975 in terms of design and development. We are currently also awaiting feedback from an independent stock condition survey of Bedworth to make sure the current position of the M&E at that building, so that we've got all the information evidence for the site based upon its age, and look at what those costs would be if we were to consider a refurbishment at that site as well. So we've currently got that in place, and that will be reported back in the near future. Sport England have seen the concepts that you've got in front and commented, and one of the main points I'd like to point out on the bottom of 7.1, Sport England have got a lot of understanding in terms of refurbishment of old facilities, and have just made a sort of error, a warning for us, in that a lot of pitfalls can happen with modernising and trying to refresh an old building. It's not until you start that work that you then uncover M&E work, everything else, ground conditions, how building technology was at that stage. That they've got some recent models that they've looked and worked with other local authorities that have done modernisation. It's cost a lot more once they've started that work, because it's not known until you actually start the work what that's going to intake. So their advice is is to look at modern building techniques which are far more efficient, carbon footprint, effective for use and users, and give you a guarantee that you've got a new building that will last you a number of years. But if the option was going forward to look at modernisation, would be really consider what that will give you, because at the end of the day, you've still got a 45-year-old shell of a building, even though you might paint and put new changing rooms, etc. in there. 7.1.1, the suggested high-level option that we'll come on to, is to build a new facility at the Miners Welfare Park, behind the existing, over the skate park facility and further back, whilst that also enables the operation of the existing site. Again, we've got to consider, if we were to do any modernisation, realistically, at any site, the standard that we're looking at, we would have to close. If we were doing anything with a pool tank and M&E, we could not maintain full service. There might be some service that we could deliver, but it would not be as it currently is. And so there's an issue there to be considered. This enables the potential new facility to be constructed at the back, and at such point then we would cross over from the old facility to the new facility, with the considerations in here being that the existing facility would then form the new car park and it would be a swap. The facility mix, or the suggestions that we've got in 7.12, are based upon the evidence in our leisure strategy and our local plan. So we have a shortfall in swimming pool capacity at Bedworth Leisure Centre. So I talked about 2 lanes. We have a 6-lane 25-metre pool at Bedworth. It's impossible to add 2 more lanes onto the existing pool. It doesn't work. That question has been asked, and by the time you've done that, you are just looking at unfeasible money. So the realistic option is to build a new pool tank with 8 lanes that would accommodate the need. And because of that then makes you look at, obviously, a new build. So that's what the proposal is to move from a 6 to 8. Again, have a teaching pool, balcony, forecourt squash court, a sports hall. It hasn't got a sports hall at the moment, but the evidence and data from our strategy, we have a shortfall of indoor sports hall space. We have very little provision in Bedworth, and that's the recommendation to look at a forecourt as part of that new build. Maintaining health and fitness, just increasing that a little bit. We've also tried to think wider in terms of the roof space. We have a number of local junior clubs that have approached the Borough Council and ward members in terms of football grass facilities, fully aware that grass pitches will only take so many games every week where they're training or playing, and a consideration is, could we use the rooftop as a consideration for all-weather grass pitch? It'd be very safe, it's secure, it could be netted in. It's not something that is new. On the M6, is it Star Valley? Star City has rooftop pitches, so it's nothing new, but it's just using that space as a good advantage. So children wouldn't be able to climb up there, they would have to go through the building, so you've got a point of control, but it's how we could support that local use. Senior and adult football has had a decline. Junior football is on a real turn and a peak, and really providing those facilities for young people to take part in sport and physical activity. As part of that, looking at car parking, electric charging point, looking at vehicle recognition as part of all that vision for a new site. What that did in terms of looking at Pingles and Bedworth and these leisure options really made us think about the wider open space in terms of the park. Because we've got some fantastic destination parks, and it's about making sure that we use that, because not everybody will turn up in their shorts, lycra, swimming trunks and go into a facility. That's not everybody's cup of tea. So it's making sure the outside space is a leisure facility as well. So for walking, cycling, physical activity, people just walk through the park with their dog and having some loops where they might meet people, talk, in terms of that social isolation, and seeing what we could do in terms of that. So bringing that outdoor space as part of the attraction for local residents. And I'll come on to the concept planning in terms of the Miners Welfare Park and Roseland Park. And obviously also look at, if we were to lose the skate park facility, look at an alternative location for that. The Pingles, constructed in 2002, and in 2 or 3 years' time it will be 20 years old. That building is at capacity. We struggle to provide public swimming because we have got a full programme, one pool, one main pool, 8-lane 25-metre with a floating floor, school lessons, swimming lessons. We have a very popular swimming club that has court time in there, and that restricts all that activity restricts what we can offer to the public. As part of the data and the local adopted plan, we need another 6-lane swimming pool. So that's not, again, something we can add to the existing tank, so we've got to look at how we support that capacity. The Pingles has had some modernisation and developments over the previous 17 years, and the building is very well used. Building technology has moved on since that was built, and I do agree with the comment that was meant earlier. It's a new looking building still. It looks great as you go in. There's some areas that in current design you wouldn't implement, and Sport England, who helped us fund that building back in 2002, was part of one of their last big lottery funding support for facilities. I've also commented that because they've site visited and said we've changed design and sort of layout from that particular facility at that time, and that was interesting to hear them when they came early on in the year. Also considering the Pingles is, we're in a fabulous destination park, and again, how do we embrace that outdoor area? The Sutton cycle route is right outside the door of the Pingles. We've got a main throughput for 2 areas of the borough coming into the town centre and out of the town centre. So it's how we look at that outdoor area to encourage more usage. So based upon the evidence, so the facility mix is based upon the evidence, we need a new 6-lane pool tank to meet with the needs up to 2031. Obviously that it means new changing facilities, because a new pool we could not continue with the existing amount. We've also considered looking at a new entrance, because the entrance is on the side of the building. As you drive in, you've got to work out where that is. So remodelling that with the design team, saying look at the entrance area, so when people drive up, they know exactly where the front of the building is. Again, extending health and fitness from what's currently there, form a new cafe plaza area so that we can use the outdoor space in terms of parks. Look at potential to reuse some of the existing space, whether that be a youth hub, outdoor area, based upon what we've identified in the concept plannings around that children and young people theme in that area or zone of the park, which I'll come back to. Again, mechanical and engineering, what you don't see is that Pingles is a 17, 18-year-old plant room, which, whilst it's still very good, it would not cope with another new pool. It's not a case of just tapping into the existing, so we need to consider how we manage that. And believe it or not, recommendation is that we'd have a whole new plant room, because you would be plugging into a 20-year-old plant room by the time you got there. So the recommendation is technology has changed, there's less space needed, and in terms of filtration of water, it's a lot more efficient and effective in new modern technology. As part of that site, we've also looked at a sports hall. Again, with the increased demand in the borough, we have a shortfall of indoor sports hall space. We don't have any sports halls in the borough that are 6 or 8 courts, which prevents indoor netball, indoor basketball because of the runoff areas. What that court space provides in terms of school delivery, and also wider delivery where a number of schools partners come together, or nationally governing bodies. So we've looked at that on the site in terms of how we would cope with that. And the designs that we'll come on to look at, we could extend using the green area at the front and the car park to put a new sports hall, a new swimming pool, and then rearrange car parking around that side. We've had conversations with British Cycling around that they're very keen to look at encouraging young people to start cycling. Whilst they're also very keen in terms of the professional cycling, they have a strategic aim at the moment to encourage new people into cycling. So parents bring a push bike, a pedal bike, and their model of best practice is to look at a leisure centre, a site where there's a cafe, a plaza, where parents are quite comfortable letting their child into the park, cycling, where they can see and watch them, and looking at a small sort of roadway where children can familiarise themselves with safe, secure learning to cycle. Following a site visit from their capital investment head person that myself and Rachel have met, that they would be very keen to look at how that would fit in into both Pingles and Bedworth. And they call it a pump track, where it's a small roadway and facilities for young children to learn to cycle. Again, talked about the offer in terms of the outside space. The last option, Northern Nuneaton Top Farm, is something that from 2016, Janet, on to my right, in terms of Warwickshire County Council, we had very early discussions when we had an outline planning application around the Warwickshire County Council land at Northern Nuneaton, and it was identified that a potential secondary school would be needed to support demand through education. At that stage, very early discussions as to, is there an opportunity that we could link with a new school that would have sporting facilities that we could enhance, that would be available for community use. Now, I know community use may raise alarms with some people in that Etone, other school sites across the borough have said, right, the facility's closed during the day, you can't have it till after 5. That's because we've had to look at Ofsted, look at safeguarding, and it's been reactive. There are good models throughout the country where facilities are open during the school day and it's shared use, but it's just considering that when those concepts are designed so that you build that factor in, whether that's a locked door, whether that's another changing room that the school goes in one area and the public go another. That design and concept is nothing new. We've got some good models throughout the rest of the country that we've heard of, looked online, and we'll be doing some further site visits. So we've gone along that model. That provides an activity hub in that area of the borough where we are potentially having 5,000 new dwellings in the northern area of Nuneaton with very little sports and leisure provision. So the design and options that we've been discussing with Warwickshire County Council ongoing and still very early in terms of a genuine partnership is how we could work together with a new school site and potential leisure facilities as well. That has progressed in terms of earlier on in the year we have met with the Regional Schools Commissioner, Department of Education team, we've had the strategic lead for major capital investment from Sporting, all visited Nuneaton to look at the concepts not only of Top Farm but both Bedworth and Pingles. But there is an option under Wave 14 which just closed last week where schools can apply for government funding to build a free school, and that's something that we have been working with partners to look at for the Top Farm site. That application is closed. In terms of those applications, we don't have any direct input. School governors, head teachers can apply and they submit their application direct to DFE. We don't have any involvement unless they come and talk to us. I'm aware there was a local press release saying that 4 schools had applied in that process, and perhaps Janet will update on that, but we are hopeful that government will consider one of those Wave 14 applications that would support a new school build on that site, and then we can work with those partners to see and develop sporting provision as well. So it becomes an activity hub in that area of the borough. To just detail the facility mix for that Top Farm site, we are looking at a school would normally build a forecourt sports hall as part of their delivery. We would look at the option to enhance that by a further 2 or 4 to make that a 6-court or an 8-court. If they're building a forecourt sports hall already, to enhance that to a 6 or an 8 it is not significant, but it makes a big difference to the local community in terms of provision and also for the school in terms of their curricular activities, so that we can encourage sport, physical activity for the wider community as well. So if it was an 8-court, it'd be quite simple to put a shutter down the middle and half can be used for community and half can be used for the school during the school day. It's about practically looking at that in terms of the design concepts. Again, health and fitness would be a key area in that area of the borough. New cafe, changing rooms. We've had ongoing discussions with the Football Foundation and the Birmingham County Football Association as to strategic need for a new artificial full-size grass pitch. That area in northern Nuneaton has been identified as a priority by the Football Foundation, and we have been having ongoing consultation with them as to whether they would fund a pitch at that site. The Football Foundation are very keen to link with secondary schools because they've got daytime usage and then they've got community usage in the evening as well. Very recently, we have had discussions with Clinical Commissioning Group, Warwickshire County Council Health, in terms of options for a surgery or a health provision at that Top Farm site because of what that sort of activity hub would be in northern Nuneaton. Very, very early discussions, but very favourable in that they've asked for consideration whether a surgery could be built, incorporated within the leisure centre. That is something that's, again, not new. We've got other models across the country where you've got one reception, efficiencies and economies of scale. So you've got GP surgery, reception, leisure facilities. One that we're aware of, it's follow the red line for health, follow the green line for sport, follow the yellow line for school as you come through the door. What that also enables, and feedback from other partners, is that the GP can prescribe health and physical activity and other activities at that site. So it's literally go from one door to another. Just pop next door. Here's 10 weeks of sport and physical activity for that change method. Very, very early, but those concepts have been discussed with those partners as to what those options are. Section 7.4 identifies high-level concept planning for destination parks. I'm very conscious there is a lot of detail in the plans that you've got in front of me. Behind you, what I've tried to do is, working with partners, is to pull those out into a bit larger plans for you. But in essence, what this has done in terms of this strategic vision has allowed us to look at, if we were to build a new facility, how does that fit within a destination park? What we don't want is just to build a new facility potentially, because that means that all our footpaths, car park, direction that people would come to those facilities would get to. So we've took a look at the concept of what would that mean for Bedworth Miners Welfare Park and for Pingles Riversley Park. So if we were to do these options, how would that change the concepts of the park, and how could we encourage that, which also supports other work we're doing as a council in terms of transforming the needs of Bedworth, in terms of how do people use those parks. So those options that you've got in the plan, very, very early concept planning, but what they've done is looked at, just take the one on my left for Riversley Park, is looked at breaking down zones within the Riversley Park, so from the George Eliot Gardens to then where the museum is, looking at the Pingles as an activity hub area, it's where we'd have pump tracks, green track, the Pingles Leisure Centre, then moving across the road to the old athletics track, if people remember that, or the Gala Fields where we have the con, what could that area be used for? Wenbrook and Wen Meadows going on, because we've got two further pieces of land as part of that Riversley Park. Some of the main themes that have come from that is how do we have a river walk and a cycle route, because we've got some great facilities, we just need to expand and develop those. That as part of strategic options for Sport England, they are not keen anymore on just building leisure centres. They fully appreciate it's the outdoor space as well, which helps with health, physical activity, mental health and well-being. It's not just about lycra swimming trunks and sweaty bodies in a leisure centre. It's about how we encourage people to use those facilities. Very similar to the Miners Welfare Park, we've looked at zones. So if we were to develop the Bedworth Leisure Centre, how does that fit with the park? What does that mean in terms of a vision going forward? So these plans really sort of set a concept for the next 30, 50 years as to what we do with those parks, and how do we look at when we do something in the park. We've got a plan of vision, and it supports the sort of direction of travel for the authority going forward. As I say, they're very early concepts. The Miners Welfare Park, and I'll pick up a couple of points that were mentioned in the previous report, in terms of, we have Park Run. Park Run has expanded greatly in the Miners Welfare Park. We'd love to do that in Riversley Park as well in the Neaton. Park Run feedback is, we've got a winter route, could we have another route? We've got a really developing, what was a cricket club, now we've got a Bedworth Sports Club that are providing a number of activities in there as a sporting hub. So how do we embrace and develop those further for the public to use? Another key area for us in the Miners Welfare Park is the Hawkesbury Meadows extensions, that the old golf course that was. There's a potential there in terms of a housing application that we would have further land given to the authority as part of that development, and how do we bring that area in? If people know Miners Welfare Park, we've got a canal bridge that's not very user friendly, but once you get through that canal bridge, the other side of that, we've got some fantastic open meadows, destination park that a number of dog walkers use and some runners from the park run, but outside of that, I would guess that not many people understand what beautiful parks we've got, and that's to extend further. So how do we encourage people to get there, make that a lot more open and transparent for cycling, walking, dog walking, park runs, etc. If I just come on to section 8 in terms of financial implications, in the appendix we've got some ballpark figures at this stage, so they're high level. We are at REBA stage 1 in terms of developing those concepts, so very early stages. But those figures have been tested by our consultants. We're looking at financial modelling in terms of how they could be developed going forward, but also they've been quality checked by Sport England. So their own QS team, their own technical team, and they've guided us. Those figures do have some movement in them in terms of, dare I mention the word Brexit and developing costs, because it's 2 years really to build a leisure centre. It doesn't just happen. You need 2 years planning, procurement, etc. So Sport England are value checked, best value of those checked, and they're the best figures that we've got based upon models at this moment in time. And just to explain that about a model, Sport England have developed a framework where it's called Core Plus models. So they can build, just like Tesco's, just like McDonald's, they'll have a Core Plus box, and this is what it costs. It then depends what you do with that box. Do you wooden clad it? Do you do fixtures and fittings separately? So we're using their Core Plus modelling and their architects to give us those costings. So it isn't a finger in the air, these are realistic costs based upon site visits. We went a couple of weeks ago to see 2 brand new sites in Barnet, which are based upon this modelling, very similar to the concepts and designs we've got in front of you. So these are realistic models that we've viewed. Just very quickly, 8.2 gives us an estimated cost for Bedworth to rebuild circa 20 million. I've detailed there in terms of what we've had advice from council, advice in terms of building on that land. We've also had an initial mining survey because I'm fully aware of what that site was before. That has not shown any reason why we could not develop on that land. And also advice around section 106 contributions if we were to build early, because those 106 doesn't come in until the site developments are built. Bedworth Leisure Centre is the oldest stock we have in the borough, and what I will say is, in terms of leisure professional, we need to do something with that building no matter what, because in the next 3, 5, 10 years, that building will come to a point where we've got to do something with it for it to be fit for purpose, and that needs to be considered in terms of going forward. Pingles Leisure Centre, in terms of section 8.3, in terms of developing those extensions, new pool, 6-lane pool, new sports hall, and reformatting the entrance and other areas, and then also considering that we don't have part of the building brand new and then the rest is 20 years old, so we'd have to look at modernising the other bits as well. We're looking at around 17.6 million, with potential contributions at this moment in time around 4 million coming from local developments. The 8.4 details the cost, 13.6 for the school facilities, but that doesn't include the GP surgery at the minute, but they've identified that they have some section 106 that they were looking to build a GP surgery in that area, and that could be used to support that funding in terms of their requirements. So that's not all the Borough Council's requirements to find all that funding. It is around partners. What we're looking at is the Borough Council responsible for the enhancements of what the school will already have. So a school would have approximately 4 grass football pitches. We would say, could you make that 6, so there's an extra bit of land and then some change in pavilion to accommodate those extra pools. So we're not looking at the whole amount, it's our contribution towards enhancing that amount at the school on the basis that it's available for community use. Partners in terms of Football Foundation, GP, British Cycling, again, all very interested in terms of what that site could do. We have not undertaken any concept planning in terms of the parks and open space on that site because we're not at that stage. We are still working very closely with Warwickshire County Council, and until the planning application really comes in for that site, we just need to continually work at where we currently are. I think if I just finish on section 9 in terms of considerations, the options detailed in the report and provide feedback to the Cabinet Member for Arts and Leisure. I appreciate there's a lot of detail in there, but what I did want to do is just focus on a few points within the appendix, if that's okay. This strategic report really pulls together background, insight, where we are and a future. It's based upon Sport England's requirements in terms of their strategic outcomes planning guidance. So if we want to seek any support from Sport England, we have to follow this format like every other local authority, like every other partner. Rachel has worked on a number of these with other local authorities, and if you do not follow this format, then Sport England just say thanks very much, but we're not interested. Not only are I would accept we're very keen to seek what potential funding Sport England may or may not provide, but it's also in terms of due diligence because they are building facilities regularly and they're inputting in terms of their technical ability. So I think their advice, their support, their knowledge is really vital for us in terms of going forward. Just some key facts on pages 2 and 3 of the document. Pages 2 just highlights our current facilities there, the top one being Pingles, the one underneath is Bedworth Leisure Centre. And just to match that, on the opposite pages you will see concept drawing for Pingles Leisure Centre, physical activity hub, and then for the Bedworth Leisure Centre physical activity hub. I did say in terms of leisure centre, that sort of word leisure centre does put some people off. So physical activity hub is where the sort of direction of travel is with partners. It isn't just around gym, swim, it's around what else that facility facilitates. And you'll see some other key outcomes in that in terms of encouraging other community groups that we haven't engaged with before, is how we can get them into using those buildings. The report is based upon 4 key areas. Page 4, it's our shared local outcomes. So that's around our local authority delivering our future. So our corporate strategy, what are those key themes? How could we support that with improving leisure facilities in the borough? So that's looking at how we, people, health, and the contribution of sport and physical activity can play to improving the health and well-being of our residents in terms of a younger age group, is setting them some key areas in terms of for them changing their current issues that we have with obesity, deprivation, high levels of mortality, etc. So it's around that whole vision, holistic approach. Section 2 of the report, and I'm jumping very quickly to page 12 to 14, is really our insight. So that is all the evidence that we have based upon our deprivation. We talked about travel in terms of people with cars, and very conscious that instead of it being a very wordy document, we've looked at how we can just produce those facts as percentages and figures based on ourselves in Warwickshire County Council and across the country. So some real key red areas for to consider how we can improve going forward residents' needs. So basically the borough demographics. Pages 14 and 15 specifically look at where potentially we're looking at in terms of new leisure centres. We've got some areas of high deprivation, and in terms of Bedworth Central and Bulkington, we focused on those, looking at Bedworth Leisure Centre to see what those key areas are within a ring around that existing leisure centre. And there's some key facts around Bedworth Central, Bulkington and Bedworth West. Sport England wanted to know within a sort of 10-minute, 15-minute radius, how and what challenges have you got already within that area, and how will you look to address that? Same for Nuneaton, we've looked at Caldwell, Hilltop, and again showed you the profiles of what those insight is within the borough. Attleborough, Wenbrook and Hilltop Cadwell have been included on pages 16 and 17. So looked at some key figures regarding those specific wards within a 10-minute catchment area. That gives us all the evidence and the data to talk to our partners, set a vision, what are our needs and what do we need to do going forward. Page 19 is from the adopted local plan and just sets out where the key areas are for housing development, where we're looking at collecting 106 for strategic sites to support our needs going forward for these key 3 strategic leisure sites. Page 21, just some quick discussion with partners. Just for example, the head teacher at Wenbrook Primary School, biggest junior primary school we've got in the borough. It's not quite the biggest in the county anymore. Very large site. Diverse in terms of the number of pupils that go there and from their backgrounds. Some challenges there in terms of those pupils and also parents. And that's right on our doorstep to the Pingles Leisure Centre. So if we could tackle those 1,000 pupils at Wenbrook Primary School and support them in terms of changing their education and life around physical health and well-being and that, making that part of their everyday, that would be a key outcome for us to just tackle and work with Wenbrook Primary School. And the head teachers provided some positive feedback there. Again, comment from Assistant Director of Warwickshire County Council in terms of leisure facility at the Top Farm. Again, great opportunity for Borough and County Council to work together to do something different and look at how physical activity can really change people's lives and the demographics we have in the borough. just again very quickly, we've done some initial insight working with everyone active in terms of using their membership database to get some feedback in page 22-23. Page 26 takes us to the third heading, interventions, looking at what can be delivered and what's sustainable. So I've quickly gone through in the report what can be delivered. 3 sites, Bedworth Leisure Centre, Pingles and Top Farm. If we were to look at those 3 in terms of developing a future vision around leisure physical activity, that would tackle a number of areas that are identified on page 27 for you in the green boxes. Whole borough place-making approach, young people, old people, families, informal, formal activity and partnerships with other groups. Putting physical activity at the heart of thinking and looking at how social prescribing and other activities could be developed. Page 28 then takes us on some detailed plans and in terms of concept planning. So page 28 to the left hand side looks at that main Miners Welfare Park. The square box that is salmon coloured is the proposed location for the new facility, which is at the back of the existing mauve colour, which then looks at turning that into a car park. So we're literally just swapping them front to back. It fits in there. Part of the design team's looked at that. That's where the mining survey's been undertaken. So we could build new whilst maintaining existing and then transfer that back to car parking to support the needs of the residents. That plan also looks at taking the other facilities into consideration. So the 2 big green areas, the one to the left is the Bedworth Oval, the one to the right in there is the Bedworth Cricket Ground, and it's how we look at that as a concept in the whole of the Miners Welfare Park, because the dynamics would change. So how do we encourage cycling from the moment you come into Miners Welfare Park to the centre and going out to Hawkesbury Junction that we talked about? That could be a beautiful 3-4 mile cycle circuit for walking, cycling, running, and most people want to look at a circuit so they can start somewhere, come back, have a coffee, park their bike and take part in all that activity. Page 28 to the right just details that red circle is sort of a crucial area that I talked about in terms of the Canal Bridge, that is a link going through to the park and then out to that Hawkesbury area where we've got a lovely pool and being extended to the Hawkesbury Meadows pending that development going on. So that area is sort of a key area for us to open up and see what we can do with that going forward to open up the rest of the park. And that identifies the sort of extension of the Miners Welfare Park going forward. Page 29 gives you a little bit more focus and detail on that and just currently where we are with the concept plans for Riversley, for Miners Welfare Park. They are concept plans, very early stages, so we've looked at mapping what we've currently got, what things that we'd need to reconsider, how we format those and where they could go in the park. So that we don't build something that we then have to think, if only we put this in another place, we don't then have to knock it down and start again. Page 30-31 just goes on to that detail. Page 31 shows you a little bit more detail. Appreciate, there's the new leisure centre in a little bit more detail, the blue being the swimming pool, the square box in the middle, and how that fits into the existing park, and as I said, with car parking space on the existing site, and how that fits in with the park and the current facilities that are in the park on page 31. Page 32 and 33 are the designs for that facility in the Miners Welfare Park. So ground floor, first floor, sports hall, 8-lane swimming pool, indoor health and fitness space, changing rooms, etc. First floor going up. And then finally the top floor on page 34 is just a concept at the minute that we've asked to look at, and it is feasible to put some rooftop pitches on the top of that building, which I think would further expand and develop that site, obviously for local residents. Whether that's 2 small-sided pitches or 1 pitch, that's just the concept at this moment in time. Just moving on to page 35, comes back to the zones for the Riversley Park and the Pingle site. So just the plans behind you just explain that a little bit further, but we've looked at that as zoning that in terms of Riversley Park. The George Eliot Gardens, the formal bit with the historical heart, and then going through the railway tunnel into the Pingles is how we make that an activity zone that's fun for young teenagers, etc., and how that fits into sporting and physical activity provision. We've got some great facilities, tennis courts, athletics track, football pitches, swimming pool, and how we enhance that, looking at developing that with the needs. Page 36 sort of highlights on that a little bit more in detail. So the blue band in the middle is looking at the extension for changing rooms, etc. You can see a new pool facility in that salmon colour with an 8-court sports hall on the existing car park. So leisure centre extension, that's where we're looking at, and the swimming pool behind the existing as to how we would support the extension in there. And then reconfiguring the car parking so that maintaining that river anchor route that we could have cycling and walking all the way through from the park, the town centre, in terms of driving that, so people could do a route and get from one area of Risley Park right the way through to Donnythorne and further afield. The designs in more detail on page 38 and 39 for those new facilities. Page 38 shows you the sort of buff brownish, light brown colour, the sports hall configuration with next to that the new swimming pool tank, 6-pool community use, so that we have got the facility to enable the public to swim, not quite 24/7, but a lot more pool programme than we've currently got. First floor plans for page 39. And then we move on to the final site, page 40, in terms of top farm. These are indicative plans that we've looked at with county in terms of that site and how they would fit in. As I said, the school would build a 4-court sports hall, so how could we enhance that to 6? Include some health and fitness, changing rooms, etc. And then on page 42, the sort of first floor drawing. Additionally to that, we talked about grass pitches, all-weather pitches, and how they would be configured. That's a very early concept in terms of that site, but discussions we've had with county, very favourable to make that an activity hub area. So the grass pitches, there are plenty of space. It's detailed in our local plan. It's detailed in the application for the planners to consider at county when they submit that, in terms of what we're looking at that site. But really to offer a sporting hub for all. Not. We're also very keen to see whether the Football Foundation would look at that as a junior central venue. I use the weather today for an example, and as a parent of young children, every weekend when you take them to football or to sport, one of the biggest bugbears of a parent is you take your child, you get them to a football pitch, and then the match is cancelled, or it's waterlogged, or the game's off. That's increasing because of the climate change, etc. But the Football Foundation have recognised that, and to have a central venue where you've got 6 or 8 football teams that just use one venue, so referees go to that one venue and ref a game on, off, looking at the artificial grass pitch and some of the grass pitches at that site being a central venue. So 6 clubs would have that pitch as their home venue, and they would just alternate from 1 hour after the next being that their home fixture. You can guarantee, apart from heavy snow and thick ice, that you could play on an all-weather pitch. So parents know they can grab a coffee, they can park, they can see their children play on an all-weather pitch, which is floodlit. So you've got a lot more flexibility with that. That is also better for the Football Foundation in terms of their statistics and evidence. That is a much better venue to drive football development to a much better level, because they've got a good standard pitch, it's consistent, it's reliable, and children know that they're going to play a game every week instead of turn up and disappointed when games called off, etc. Also a lot easier to manage in terms of refereeing and the volunteers and support that are required behind every football team to make sure that happens. Page 44 just talks around delivering our outcomes and sustainability. It shows you there 3 boxes with partners that we've had very early discussions with, in terms of very interested in terms of the site. 45 details some proposed implementation plans at this stage, and we've put those in just to sort of guide us in terms of moving forward, but obviously depending on funding other areas we would have to work and move those, but they're based upon a new school needs to be built for new school places by such and such a time. Bedworth Leisure Centre, we've got a shelf life, and the survey report will identify more clearly what that shelf life is before we need to do something at that site. So that those dates are movable, but are based upon what we know at this moment in time. Some interventions, how we're going to manage those interventions, and some initial KPIs have been identified on page 47. The final section, number 4, commitment, gives you 3 sites, some potential partners, what we would need to look at in terms of funding those, and that's obviously for members to look at going forward. Prudential borrowing, section 106, external funding, working with partners. Page 50 gives us those ballpark figures. And page 51, the last page in terms of our business case and our shared vision and values. I appreciate that's a lot of detail, and I've done a lot of talking, so I'll try with Rachel and Janet to answer any questions or queries you might have. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. Right, I have two public speakers. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to stand up if you don't mind. You might not notice that, but...
I can tell from here.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I was quite impressed really how Kevin's got a nice glossy document based on the things that I've scribbled down just this afternoon. I don't know how that managed that. But I haven't seen that document yet. But we've got really exciting opportunities for Nuneaton and Bedworth here, Chair, now. And although it's a much wider strategy and a really impressive one, I want to concentrate particularly on the Bedworth Leisure Centre and the surrounding thing. And Kevin's described it very nicely actually about all the things that we can link through to other nice areas. Those pools and ponds down as you go from Bedworth across the fields to Hawkesbury is a really nice place to be. But right from the start, Chair, what I want to do is, because I think we do have to concentrate and prioritise, and if I was a member of this OSP, which I'm not, I would urge people on it to recommend to Cabinet to adopt the contents of this report. But when I talk about prioritise, I would say we need to prioritise the Bedworth Leisure Centre for a new build project, and that's because of its age and condition. I have to say that I don't agree with the section 7.1 paragraph 2 that the Bedworth Leisure Centre is in a good condition. I don't think any user of that centre would accept that description of it, you know, so, but that is just one minor criticism within the whole depth of the report. The thing for us as well with it, it's not just about a new build and what can happen, it's the massive benefits it will provide for the health and well-being of Bedworth residents. And it's a great opportunity to help those in some of the most deprived areas of the town. And when I say that, I'm talking about Bedworth, but it equally applies across all of the borough. And a new facility in Bedworth that's not only sustainable but built to the latest environmental specifications has got to be good. There's got to be a lot of waste and impact the current building currently provides. And finally, Chair, I'm really confident that this can be delivered, and the report shows in detail the partnerships already being worked on by, with our officers and those other people. We've got really good experience recently of creating these partnerships and being able to deliver the things that we have aspirations for. As long as we have having the aspirations, we need to have a end thing. So just to finish, Chair, I will just repeat my request for that those items 1 and 2 that this OSP recommends to the Cabinet to adopt the contents of the report, and also that the Bedworth Leisure Centre be given a priority because of the condition it's in now. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions to the Councillor and Councillor Condicott?
You want priority for Bedworth, but a lot of the section 106 money is currently coming in for developments in Nuneaton. How do you square the circle that the housing and the population growth pressures coming to Nuneaton, whereas actually you want the £20 million Bedworth project. How optimistic are you that you are going to start getting the Section 106 money to actually fund the Bedworth project from the ones that are allowed to be paid for by Bedworth? Because you know, as Chair Planning, you can't have things in one area funding things that are 6 miles away.
Well, Chair, this, I've got to say, it highlights one thing that this council is consistent in. He only concentrates on Nuneaton. As a borough, we've always worked on the theory that regardless of where monies lie, they go to the areas that are needed. And actually, when you look at, you probably weren't about council, but when they built the new Pingles, a lot of the money that went into the Pingles actually came from Bedworth. Came from monies raised from land sales in Bedworth. So it's not a, if the money comes off 106s in Nuneaton, it can only be spent in Nuneaton, or 106 in Bedworth only in Bedworth. There's equally a lot of development happening in Bedworth as well. But as Kevin says, it's reliant on those things going ahead anyway. Like I say, I'm confident that we can see a picture overall and not just as a thing. I just highlighted the Bedworth one. You could say I'm being parochial, but the truth, the fact of the matter is, the Bedworth Leisure Centre is in a dire condition and it needs a new build that can accommodate the needs of the town and the wider area. Thanks,
So
Chair.
with respect, I agree that Bedworth needs doing first. The point I was making is Section 106s nowadays cannot be spent, collected in one area and spent in the other.
Well, 106 is in Seal and
Councillor Evans, did you indicate?
So, are you opening it up to all members?
No, for point of clarification.
I'll wait then, yeah.
Anybody else for point of clarification for the councillor? No? Mrs. Condacor?
On page 5, on your first thing about the aims and what have you and things, you need to reword number 4, because we don't want to reduce incidence of mental health across the borough. We want to reduce incidence of mental ill health across the borough. I think that is really quite important. And also, on page 47, the key performance indicator, number 7, also is very poorly worded. In terms of reduction in impact of mental health in adults, it doesn't really make sense. I know what you're aiming at, but please can you reword those? There is obviously an awful lot of stuff in that. I mean, you did allude to it, Kevin, but you know, Top Farm is a long way off. We haven't even got outline planning permission for that site, and knowing how long it's taking to get anything on any of the other sites that have been approved for 5-6 years and virtually houses built, we've still not got the infrastructure. It's a problem. This is obviously about the sort of 3 main, having 3 main centres. Is the leisure thing going to also have some sort of minor hubs elsewhere? Because I'm very conscious that Bulkington and places like Kingswood right out on the other side, people, the access is quite different for those. On the concept park lands, obviously being a keen park run person, it's absolutely essential that we keep our nice park run course, please, or that it's, if there was a change, that it's as good. In terms of cycling routes, we don't want just good cycling routes through the parks areas. We need good cycling routes. I mean, obviously that needs to be working with Warwickshire County Council so that people can actually get to the leisure centres. I mean, from Pingles, it's okay if you're going out towards, Attleborough, Wembrook, because you've got the lovely Wembrook Trail and things, but coming from other parts, it's not, it's not such a good access. I'm a bit concerned looking at the concept plan and how much green space we would lose into parking at Pingles, and also that it sort of getting closer and closer to Wembrook, which I would guess has actually some floodplain along that section there, so that's something we'd have to be very aware of. And again, in terms of having hubs smaller hubs elsewhere, because one of the reasons I took up running was that it's something I can do from my front door. I don't have to get somewhere to go and do it. And the your big leaflet thing said 30% of the population of Nuneaton and Bedworth do not have access to a private car. So actually accessing these places is, you know, very important. I think those are the main things I've picked out from the report. Thank you.
Any points of clarification from members on the panel? Mr. Condico? No? Okay, I'll open up the debate to the panel. Anybody got anything to say about the report? Councillor Evans.
Just one thing I would say, obviously I'm really supportive of this, and thank you very much, Kevin, for all your work and your colleagues for putting this together. One of the complaints that I get quite often about Bedworth Leisure Centre at the moment, I'm not trying to be quite petty here, but it's actually car parking. A lot of people are struggling, and not even at peak hours, it's all the time, particularly in Saturday mornings when you've got all the clubs coming down to use it. So what I wanted to ask was, on page 43 of the report it says increased car parking facilities, but on this it says new car park approximately 87 spaces. Well, that's actually a reduction because currently there's 110 at Bedworth Leisure Centre. So that's actually a reduction in parking, which does concern me. I am supportive of the plans, but if I'm to give my support, I would expect the existing car park to at least double.
Okay. Chair, just to answer that, I'm not sure. It's an increase in car parking substantially. That's what's being proposed. So the existing car park at the back would be retained. The building where we currently are would be used for car parking, also retaining that front bit as you drive in. So there would be an increase in car parking facilities at the site. However, just in terms of ensuring that we're being very open and transparent, when we visited Barnet in London 2 weeks ago, the Sport England model, they have really considered about car parking in terms of you can just keep adding more and more car parking and taking up green space. So there is that consideration as cycling, electrical points for, but also there's a limit that the Sport England say, well, we would identify that you need this amount for this size building. If you go further than that, that's your choice, but it's not that we would be forcing that on you. So it was quite eye-opening in terms of Barnet, that the large site there, how very little car parking they had on such a big green space area, but that was their decision. But what they're trying to do is get people to cycle, walk, public transport for those sites. So we've been mindful of that, but both Pingles and Bedworth have got an increase in their existing car park because we're fully aware of the problems with Bedworth in terms of that. So the numbers are more than what we've currently got. And we're increasing provision activities at the Bedworth Leisure site in those proposals. In terms of the overall concept plans, there's other areas identified potentially in the Miners Welfare Park for additional car parking to support park run and everything else that we're looking to deal with that, but I take your point on board.
Right, I probably have got about 4 hours worth of stuff, so I think it might be best if I could have a meeting with Kevin to talk through details of this, because obviously a lot of the things aren't, they're too detailed to go for a big meeting. But I do have a couple of general points it'd be nice to raise, and hopefully Philip will let me have a meeting with Kevin at a suitable point. Going through the Item 8 report itself, it says the local plan was adopted in June 2018 at 4.3, it's actually 2019. And one of the things we need to realise is we're actually 8 years into the plan, so there is an issue about getting money from things that have been built over the last 8 years. We've only actually got 12 years of this plan to collect money. So I think we need to be mindful of that when we've got these grand plans and £9 million from section 106 and whatever, that we're actually a long way into the current 20-year plan. And there is talk that we might review our plan and actually move the end date out, but actually have the same number of housing. So things will not just slip with your project, but actually the whole housing profile. We're not going to build 14,000 homes. And in detail, we'll talk about Top Farm. The Top Farm site is going to slip, even in the Borough Plan's housing trajectory. We do not finish Top Farm by 2031. So we need to, in developing all these plans, we need to have an end date that's actually 2036 or something. recognising the fact that actually we haven't even got planning permission with Top Farm, we haven't sold it to a developer. All sorts of things will mean we are not going to build 14,000 houses in the time. We may, as a council, be required to allocate land for 14,000, but actually you're never actually required to force developers to build. On the Top Farm issue, you talk about a GP surgery. I'm really alarmed by this because a lot of Section 106 money we've collected explicitly says it's for a GP surgery on the Church Lane farm in Wellington. So we will chuck away potentially £1 million worth of land and Section 106 monies if we relocate the GP surgery into your new leisure centre. As marvellous as it sounds, we have to be understand what all the legal agreements have already been made. And we also have to understand that the GP surgery was agreed in 2012 and it's already massively delayed. So we could potentially build it in 2 years, hopefully, on its current site. If it gets taken into this school and leisure and everything else, it might be 10 years before we get our GP surgery. We have so many things that are an issue. You talked about Wave 14. The government's going to fund 18 schools in the whole of the country on Wave 14. So we shouldn't assume that Wave 14 is a given. 18 schools over the whole country means you've actually got a fairly slim chance of getting it through this wave. It's more likely the school will be approved in Wave 15 or 16. So I think we need to be a bit of a reality check here. I say there's loads of details which I hope to have a meeting with you. One of the questions I also had was a members working group. I assume there wasn't any cyclist on that members working group because I think I'm the only really active cycling councillor. So I do hope we have some reality check and some cycling input into these plans because they are very good in terms of what you're providing, but a lot of it is the details and things. And I noticed on your concept plans about going out for cycle route onto the canal from all your leisure things. So there's a lot of things that then tie into the Canal and Rivers Trust and the Cycling Forum. Generally, I say I'm very alarmed by the expectation of Top Farm's going to come forward early. The Top Farm has got 200 cows to dig up with foot and mouth disease and all sorts of issues. It means it's not going to be a quickly developed site. And the neighbouring site on Calendar Farm, Phase 2, that has had the developer do a road show and then mothball their plan. So various things are changing. So I don't want this plan, and you talked about actually quite rightly having a plan B option. You haven't told us what your alternative plan B is if Top Farm doesn't happen in a reasonable timescale. Obviously, could we transport this Top Farm plan onto Calendar Farm or Golf Drive or one of the other sites? So I think you do need to look at not being too tied to that. I am very concerned about the amount of tarmac you're putting over the Miners Welfare Park and the lack of green spaces and things. And I'm also cognizant of the fact we've got a civic hall that needs a refresh at some point. So maybe actually merging some of your ideas into the civic hall where we've got a cafe and a bar and things, and actually making more sports use and leisure use, and actually bridging across YP's Ringway. And actually, we've got an idea now of Miners Welfare Park, and then we've got a civic hall that actually needs more footfall as well. So maybe think a bit more about what goes where. I said I'd love to have a meeting with you and go through all these pages because otherwise I'll take up the whole evening. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to mention anything about Top Farm?
Sure. There's a few things actually to come out of that about Top Farm. I'll start with the Wave 14 notion. There are two ways that new schools can be funded. All new schools have to be free schools, and there's two ways that they can be funded. One is through the Wave process, whereby academy trusts and community groups can apply directly to the Department for Education to say that they want to set up a new school in an area where there is a recognised shortage of school places. Wave 14, as Kevin said earlier, the round for that has just closed. The benefit to the County Council and to the Borough Council, if we are successful in getting a Wave 14 school, is that the DFE pay for the delivery of that school. That's the benefit. If we don't get a Wave 14 school, we need a secondary school anyway. So the County Council will come forward with the other funding route, which is something called a presumption route. And effectively, as a County Council, we advertise for somebody to come and run the school. We as a County Council will then forward fund and design and build that school, and then we'll hand it over on a 125-year lease to whoever the Academy Trust is. Where we've had the discussions, and Kevin mentioned earlier, we've already met with the Regional Schools Commissioner, we've met with the Education Skills Funding Agency New Schools Unit, and we've spoken with representatives from the Department for Education. We've explained to them that we want to do something different than just having a school. We believe that we need to do something different in the area, and that it's a missed opportunity if we don't actually do something interesting, innovative and different. We've explained to them, and their automatic reaction to that was, well, you need to do a presumption route then because you've got control of it. We explained to them that funding is the major issue, so they actually recommended that we try and promote that there's a need for a school in this area as part of the Wave 14 status. The only part of Warwickshire where we can look to get a Wave school is Nuneaton. And that's because, unfortunately, because of the educational attainment in Nuneaton, we cannot get Wave funding anywhere else in the county. At the time that we were speaking with the DFE, we did talk to them about, if we don't get Wave 14, can we talk to them about working with them so they help us forward funding wise, that we then pay them money back when we collect 106 funding. They weren't against that notion, and we do actually have a precedent of doing that elsewhere in the county. So I think that might hopefully allay some fears about Wave 14. I know about the foot and mouth problem,
Yes.
and colleagues in our property team are looking at actually dealing with that anyway, because they'll need to deal with that before they actually sell the site. So that is actually happening. In some ways, the fact that it's a county council site anyway is an advantage, because even if the site hasn't come forward for outline planning permission and been approved, it's our land anyway. So if DFE do approve a Wave 14 school, we haven't got to go and look for a site, we've got one. So that helps a little bit. The current position as far as the planning application, as far as I know, and the one important thing I think I have to say is that as far as my job is concerned, I don't treat the county council as a landowner any different than any other landowner. So as far as I'm concerned, they still have to pay the same developer contributions, and they're treated in exactly the same way as Taylor Wimpey would be, or anybody. So there's no preferential treatment because it's the county council. So there is that little bit of a Chinese wall between myself and the property team as far as this is concerned. There were a number of challenges from the county council when the planning application was submitted. They fought Kevin and myself quite hard as far as the land take that we're saying we need. We have now got them to accept that. As far as I'm aware, there is no outstanding information required for the planning application to be considered by committee, and I believe it's the county council that have asked for that to be put on hold. But I think that's only because they are looking at how to market the site once permission has been given, and want to make sure that they've considered that before they actually take something to planning committee, so that where there's a section 106 provided as part of that planning decision, that's all agreed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Godfrey, you indicated.
Oh, could I just say to Janet, there is more than 200 bodies there of cattle. There is sheep as well, and dogs and everything.
I can remember in a previous
They do
role
rot,
having to ring the school next door to say to keep the windows shut.
Yes,
so.
yeah, but yes, it was a horrific
We all-
sight.
Yeah, I can remember it. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support the Bedworth redevelopment of the leisure centre. I think Kevin alluded to say it to start with. It was built in 75. They only last up to 40 to 45 years. And I think it is time that Bedworth, we'd sorted the Bedworth Leisure Centre out and we built a proper, nice, purpose-built site for the people of the Neaton and Bedworth to use. My second question is to Kevin. The Pingles was built in 2002. Now, 17 years later, we're looking to redevelop that. When it was first built, was there any slack in the system to add on to things, or was it just built for a cost?
Okay, Chair, there's no capacity to extend the current site.
So it was just built, that was it, it was built, there was no forethought to add a bit more on at a later date?
That isn't normally the case, that they build a site.
I disagree. I hope to add that when they do Bedworth, there would be an idea that they could add on a little bit more if Bedworth grows.
That's an interesting concept, because there may be some members in this room that I think when Bedworth Leisure Centre was built in 1975, that
I can remember
there was a
we
wall
contributed
in that site that potentially could be extended. I'm looking to...
No, the new one. The new.
Yeah, so that concept, I think, in 75 was considered at that time. I'm looking at a certain member of the council that might know that, but that I understood there was one wall that wasn't fixed or tied in with the existing, potentially to extend. That's not a model that Sport England I'm aware of, and Rachel perhaps can come in there in terms of all the development work she's with, but because the sites are built with the infrastructure and the M&E for what's on the site. That's not to say you can't extend and develop like we've suggested in terms of Pingles, but that's not something I've come across. Chair, I'll see whether Rachel...
I'm just a little bit disappointed with the Pingles, because after 17 years we've now got to spend 18 million to revamp it, whereas if we had the forethought to start with, we could have been ready to go further on now without having to spend so much money.
Okay, on Pingles, I think one of the challenges with Pingles is that you have a main laned pool and you have some leisure water, so you don't have any dedicated kind of teaching space, and so you haven't got enough capacity for all the current trends and uses, demands that people want to see in a leisure centre. Because you have a very, very successful club, they take up a hell of a lot of the capacity of your main pool, and that's one of the issues, because swimming lessons, as was alluded to earlier by SLM, it's the second biggest income generator in a leisure centre.
So these new leisure centres, will they have extra capacity?
So when you design, so if you compare leisure water with a standard tank, a standard lane leisure, a standard laned pool, there is more capacity in a laned water area than there is in a leisure pool. So we're suggesting that you focus moving forward on exactly what you've just said, the water space that gives you the greatest capacity and the greatest flexibility to meet the demands of today's communities and moving forward. The challenge with trying to build a leisure centre now and then add on in the future is, if you take a swimming pool, for example, if you can imagine building it now with 8 lanes and then wanting to add 2 in the future, what you have to do that is you've got to unpick all of that construction, and basically you'd be resoldering, you know, to put it really basically, an extra bit of a tank onto an existing one and tiling over it. And if you tried to do that in your own bathroom at home, you'd probably end up with not a great situation. So if you can imagine, so
I've got one.
That's why it's challenging. Equally, it's challenging for a sports hall, because if you can imagine the design of them, although they're basically sheds, they're basically built in as a 4-court or a 6-court or an 8-court. So they're built in modules. So if you just try to add on one, you'd be spending a hell of a lot of money to add on one badminton court, for example. So what we're trying to incorporate in these is what we've described as multi-purpose space, and I think that will give you some capacity moving forward for alternative activities, because fads and fashion change, especially on, you know, the fitness side of things. So we're trying to take account of what you're saying, but there are some, I'm not trying to be difficult, but there are some real kind of technical challenges with adding on to bits of water space.
Just to add to that, in terms of the evidence data from Sport England facilities planning model for adopted local plan, we can only use the evidence for the capacity that we need. So in terms of any collection of section 106, if we wanted to go from an 8 lane to a 10, that extra 2 lanes in terms of if we wanted additional flexibility and extra capacity would be something that would have to be funded by the authority. We could not ask for 106 for that because there isn't any evidence and data to say we need 10. The evidence and data says we need 6, and that's what the evidence has been built upon for Sport England and our leisure strategy, because the calculations from Sport England do that nationally is around number of people, number of bodies in a pool space.
And to that extent, Chair, what Kevin is actually doing is answering Julian's question in terms of future casting.
Yes,
Because
that's right.
it is actually assuming the usage at 2031 with the population at that point in time.
Can I just have
Okay,
one? I represent the Whitestone ward. We'd love some play facilities at Whitestone, yet I see you're going to take from us on the 106 money 1.8 million, which represents £2,911 per house on the development that that they're going to propose at Golf Drive 6. So could you look at the Whitestone and give us some facilities? They'll all say, oh, we go to Paul's Land, but Paul's Land is in Attleborough. Can we just have our play equipment?
Oh, come on.
Well, it's a million miles away then, yeah.
Paul's Land.
Carbon footprint,
You can
please.
be in Paul's Land in 5 minutes from where...
It's not from me when I walk.
That
And
is
from
nonsense.
Rubbish.
Kevin.
Chair, collection of 106 is very data driven and has to be robust, because sitting with developers, with their solicitors, etc., that will come in, it is very robust. And in terms of the evidence trail, in terms of the local plan, we've gone through that due process with the adopted strategy. So collection of 106, simply put, we've got 2 swimming pools. I'm sure that lots of people would like a swimming pool locally.
Well, I know we
But
can't
in,
have a swimming
but in
pool,
terms of strategic sites,
we'd like the equipment uprated, that we, the little play area,
Okay.
we'd like that uprated.
all right. So play area comes under open space collection, not leisure contribution. So I will feed those comments back to the open space.
It's in the plan.
But
Taylor Wimpey are going to give us a green gym. That's a start.
right.
Councillor Sargent.
I think the concept is great, and I think the sort of idea of Bedworth upgrading or redeveloping Bedworth facilities as early as possible, because I do know a lot of people from go to Bedworth because they say that the facility is better. I mean, I've never been myself personally, but people do say that, but they do talk about issues. So I think if that can be brought forward, as Councillor Hancock says, then I would, I would go for that, because I think, a building from 1975, Nuneaton's got one from 2002, there's a massive difference there, isn't there? So I think, I would support that being brought forward.
Common sense.
Yeah. You mentioned the Wenbrook, going down the Wenbrook, and I know Councillor Jackson will probably pepper others up, because that's your ward, isn't it? One of the things that I was challenged with, well, not challenged with, but asked for, was a gym, one of these outside gyms. So I'd be interested, because you talked about a walkway and a cycleway through that, because it is quite nice down there, to see if there could be one put there, and that's the other side of Doningthorne Avenue.
Chair, in the concept plans, that the feedback and consultation will consider that. I think we've identified in the Pingles area potentially some outdoor green gym. In terms of green gym, I think the concept is right. We've just got to get that right, because in terms of those facilities, we in terms of evidence-based and how many people are using that, we don't monitor that, and we can't monitor that in terms of how that's being used. I will say the only problem feedback is when there's equipment broken. I'm fully aware that one at the Miners Welfare Park is used a great amount, because we have that feedback from the leisure centre, and when you go there you can see that. But that's something I will take back to the parks and the concept plan as to how we do that, and to go back probably 20-30 years, it was called a trim trail then, when you had wood and things like that, tree trunks that we use. So I think there is a place for that. It's how we manage that and make sure it's on a key footpath route, because when it's on wet areas of grass, there's no access to it. You then, like today, you would get nobody using it because they wouldn't go across that. So that's a great bit of feedback in terms of the concept plan, how we manage that going forward and look at those outdoor space activities.
Yeah, the REM trail, I think it's called, is there.
Yes,
isn't it?
that's
Yeah,
right.
They're in the George Eliot schools next door.
Yes.
And I'm county councillor there. Yeah.
Council, are we finished?
Yeah.
Council Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. I think me and Sport Party Company about 1980, if I remember correctly. I mean, it's not been an item that I would go down the route of. But anyway, I think we're in danger of losing things here. We're here to talk about this particular concept and this particular idea and how we want to go forward. And we're trying to prioritise things. It does say provide feedback to the Cabinet member, but I think there's a danger if we try and do these things. It's obvious from the report, it says it quite clearly about funding coming in, section 106. It doesn't mention SIL, I don't think, but SIL, prudential borrowing, capital receipts, all manners of things, and Sport England. And there are other people involved in this. It's not just this council, there are other people involved in this who may want to set some sort of stall out, like Sport England. I mean, we had no end of problems with Sport England at one time when they used to be on the county council, and their peculiar ideas about stopping things. It was awful, but they are a sort of governing body, and we've got to take cognizance of that. We've got to recognise that there will be other people involved in this, and as it goes through, and to try and put limiters on it, about priorities, could be dangerous. I would accept where the words "where possible," we prioritise Bedworth Leisure Centre. Not a problem, particularly with that, and trying to lock the portfolio holder into that. But the issue should not be that takes priority over everything else when those other things may slow up or slow down or even stop, because we want to prioritise Bedworth. And I don't think that's right. We've got to treat this as a plan overall. That's what we're talking about. That's where we're coming from, and that's where it is. So if the wording goes in wherever possible, prioritise Bedworth Leisure Centre, I'm comfortable with that, but I don't want it locked in to a definite that would be acceptable, because it's definitely not acceptable to me because of the dangers inherent in that, in stopping other things or slowing other things up, and that's not right for the residents of this borough. We have to be responsible for everybody in this borough, not just one area.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, and as far as Whitestone goes, I would say to him, do what the people of Kingswood do in Stockingford, and get off the backsides and do their own thing. Because if you go up to Stockingford Community Centre, you'll find out what it's all about.
We haven't got a community hall yet.
You've got
Kevin,
Just
like Kevin answer the
I
question.
think might be a tripartite response on school and just in terms of initial feedback, in terms of Sport England councillor, we have for the past 6 or 7 months been meeting with their head of strategic facilities planning. So all the concepts and designs that you've got in front of us tonight, they have seen those and commented on them. So we've kept Sport England fully updated. I'm not a gambling man, and I'll ask Rachel to perhaps she's got a better understanding of that. But he plays a very good poker game, but now and again he smiles and there's a few hints in his face that he's very interested. He'd never been to Nuneaton and Bedworth. He works in London, has a number of boroughs, areas across obviously the country that he looks at. A lot of those are cities, but we got him to come to Nuneaton and Bedworth and have a look at the field, meet partners, have a look at our leisure centres. The concept and the vision we have in front, he likes. He's asked us to go away, do some more work and come back to him. He's also asked if he could feed into any future cabinet report. He would like to actually write his element in there, may well also attend. So for me there's an early commitment from there, but we are very early stages. They look at future planning the next 3 and 5 years of how they're going to spend their budget. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm a better poker player than Kevin is. They love this project. I'm telling you now, Sport England love this project because their current way that they're looking at funding is they want to solicit projects like this. They want to work with local authorities who really put health and well-being of their community as a top priority because of all the benefits that being more physically active can build into everyday life. So it's going to end up with better educational attainment, healthier lifestyles, people being more active. If people get all of those things right and they improve their mental health, they're actually more employable and they're able to work for longer, which means that some of the issues that you referred to earlier, if they've got a better economic situation, then they're actually able to do lots more other things in their lives. So whilst physical activity can't solve everything, it can contribute massively. And so just to pick up on your point, Councillor, they are really interested in the concept of an active borough. That's why we've called this report this. But within that, they recognise the specific issues that have been raised about Bedworth. It is your oldest facility. It is in the worst condition. So we're really hoping that they are going to put their money where their mouth is on this. They're funding us at the moment. They wouldn't be doing that if they weren't interested in this project because they can approach other boroughs, other districts, across the country. So I think that the way we've tried to present it is exactly what you've said. This is about the whole borough because actually Nuneaton and Bedworth, as you're well aware, is the most deprived borough in Warwickshire, and yet down the road you've got people in Leamington, in Warwick, in Stratford. Their young people have much better opportunities from an early age than yours do. It's not your fault, but this has happened, and that's wrong. The young people in your borough should have the same life chances, starting from the same sort of position, and that's what we want to try and achieve through this. So the report talks about the overall borough, but it acknowledges that in terms of timescale, Bedworth is probably the priority within that overall concept. So it's not just about doing one thing, and we've been really conscious of trying to say that to Sport England. This is not about one centre, this is about a whole borough approach. We can't put all the timescales down at the moment because of some of the issues that have been alluded to with Top Farm. So it might be, I don't know, it might be Bedworth, Pingles, Top Farm, it might be Bedworth, Top Farm, Pingles, I don't know at the moment, but it's really important to have that overall approach, but with the acknowledgement of the fact that Bedworth is the ageing facility and in the worst condition. Does that kind of allay some of your concerns?
No.
No.
Okay, right, well I don't know what else I can say
It's
then.
been like this for the last 30 years.
The issue is quite simple for me. We are one borough.
Exactly, and that's what it is.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't mind. Everything you said about Bedworth is right. And if that comes on, that's fine. I haven't got a problem with it. But I don't want the other elements of the plan parked or delayed or put off because it's a priority. Bedworth becomes a priority. And that's the issue for me. And I understand what you're saying about Sport England. I mean, you did ever so well to get them out of London. The County Council never once got them out of London. We asked them dozens of times. So hats off to you for that. And I hope they keep continuing to be helpful in this project. But it's a concept plan, and I think we should just concentrate on the concept plan and just lose all the say we want this and we want that, we want the other. Because it could go on forever. There's 34 councils on this borough, every one of them could ask for something. And I'm sure they will, given the opportunity. But this is what we've got tonight, and this is what we've got to vote on.
Councillor Rodkin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Kevin really for a fantastic presentation and the report that's in front of us and his team. I'm fully in support and pleased to see this report and fully support the prioritising Bedworth. It is an ageing building built in 1975. I do, when it says it's in good condition, I do dispute that. There is only recently my son has not been able to attend swimming lessons there with the school because there's been a safeguarding issue due to the changing facilities there not to meet the needs of the children there when the general public are there, so they've not been able to go swimming for a time. So yeah, I'm fully in support and pleased to see this, and I support that Bedworth to be prioritised due to the condition of the building and the age.
Chair, can I just qualify those words in terms of the building for its age is in good condition. Perhaps in terms of you know it's built in 75, but I think in terms of how it's been maintained, looked after by the
yes, I'm not disputing that, but there's issues around the change of facilities with the safeguard because of the setup
and the age of it.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. There's can I ask a quick question then on the Northern Farm thing? Is there a time period, Janet, for the school to be opened, or?
Based on existing pupil forecasts, we predict that we will need a new secondary school to open no later than September 23. And certainly that was the timescale we spoke to the Department for Education about. And we spoke to them before Wave 14 had been announced, and they told us that we needed to put in, you know, express our desire for a school as part of the Wave 14 bid. So that will need to happen anyway. So I think this notion of whether we've got outline planning permission for the whole site or not, as far as the county council goes and as far as colleagues in education are concerned, we are having to plan to build that school ourselves if the DFE don't come forward and do it for us.
Okay, which of course would fit well into this plan, the Sligo plan. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, fantastic document, really nice. I know a lot of work's gone into it. I'm so glad Sport in England are behind it. Just a couple of little things. I know that some of the councillors who weren't councillor Conical went on their bikes to some of the destination parts to do some investigation as part of the working party. Just wanted to get that out there. And as far as the one borough thing goes, when my children were little, I always used to take them to Bedworth with their cousins from Whitestone, because it had that amazing slide in the swimming pool that we didn't have in Nuneaton. So this divide is, I don't like it. And there's just 3 little questions. Is it Sport England that don't like the term leisure centre, Kevin? Or where's that come from? Why physical activity club? Why is that meant to be leisure centre?
I think Chair, in terms of that wider aspect of sport and physical activity, I think leisure centre sort of the common ground, Rachel, in terms of activity hub is all encompassing, is all embracing. So no matter what age, what activity you would be looking at, we could provide it in one of those activity hub facilities. I think leisure centre is a sort of a 70s terminology, and I think people's perception is it is a gym, it is a number of people that are fit and healthy go there, and we're not encouraging those groups or those people to take part in physical activity, and we haven't broken down those barriers. So it's that wider aspect of sport and physical activity. So it's not just sport that people are familiar with, basketball, football, badminton, swimming, gym. It's around all those other ancillary facilities. So an activity hub embraces that open space, walking, mental health and well-being, meeting people, social isolation, cycling, all that around an activity hub.
And the other thing, it looks lovely, diversity, etc. That being who I am, the bit on page 26 about Asperger's United have regular swimming sessions at the Pingles. Asperger's United, as far as we know, have 2 swimming activities annually. One's at Coventry and one's at Hinckley. So it looks lovely, but I'm not sure that that particular thing is as lovely as it does look in the version.
Is that it?
That's it, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
Yeah, I like this. I like it very much, and I think in the sort of age that we live in, when mental health issues, obesity, just people getting off their settees basically, I think this is a really good thing, and we do have some very deprived areas in our borough, and I'm hoping that this will, in some small way, think, oh, okay, so the borough do care about us with these lovely facilities. Whether they all come about or not, I don't know, it's not up for me to say. Particularly in Bedworth, I also like the way that some of the areas, we've got some nice areas in Bedworth, but this plan helps to join them up as well. So you've got, you know, sort of swimming in, but you can also do your walks down here, and no, it's just a joined up approach geographically as well. And if we are a council that want value for money, then surely a building that is at the moment can only be patched up at the best. Surely sometimes you have to say, well, is the cheapest way of providing something better by knocking it down and rebuilding? And that's how I feel about the swimming pool in Bedworth, because that's the area where I live. I know that it's not the best place, and if it is 1975, building regs and all sorts were so different then. And isn't it better to have a facility that might have a larger time scale than it does now? Isn't it better sometimes, like I've just said, to knock down and restart? So I think this does include value for money as well, which I think you've reiterated to, particularly, I know, you know, there's Nuneaton and but particularly Bedworth. If there was one kind of small thing, and it's only because I'm a tree hugging person, can we make sure that there are plenty of trees around, that all this development doesn't, there are some lovely trees and in the Miners Welfare Park, and it's very green, and you know, it's very lovely. Can we make sure that we don't knock too many trees down in the process? Thank you.
Any other members of the panel? No. Can I just welcome the document as well, as to sum up, because perhaps we should have had all this last year, because it was a vision thing. It'd be 2020, wouldn't it? I knew I was going to get it in somewhere. So all these things are going to happen. This is back to the vision thing. We had a document transferring Nuneaton. There's a document yesterday that went to the Cabinet referring to Bedworth Town Centre, what can happen in Bedworth. This is the bits and pieces that's going to fit in between the jigsaw. So I'm looking at the whole thing, you know, rather than just bits and bobs. And I think this is the way forward. The reason it took so long to come back, because I was expecting somebody today something about the working panel being set up 2 or 3 years ago, and it's taken a while for it to come forward, is because we felt that this was a time to get everybody together, to get partners on board, to get everybody to turn and say, this is what we can actually do. And this is not pie in the sky, this is not just something that we're thinking about and possibly might happen. No, this will happen. Because as a borough, we'll be positive as well. I know I can say about Hawkesbury, and we're talking about the land of Hawkesbury, we're talking about the pool that's inside Hawkesbury. I can talk about the Newdigate Cut. I can talk about the bicycle track is going to go all the way from Bedworth Heath down the side of the railway line, watch Heath Road as you cross it, then past the rugby club, and then up to, and then Coventry Road, and that takes you all into Bedworth Park, and it takes you to the Newdigate Arm, and it takes you to that side of Bedworth, which is going to be opened up. So all this stuff is positive as far as I'm concerned, and I hope the panel think the same. Councillor Hancock said at the beginning that the proposal should be that we accept Oh, I think you get it. The recommendation is on 2.1, the member of the panel have been asked to consider the information and report of future opportunities that this might be to provide enhanced leisure and open space for Brigham. I would recommend that for the chair, that that's what we do. The comments have been made, will go forward to the officers and of course the cabinet member. And I, like many others, welcome this, and I would think the panel itself would overwhelmingly agree with that. Do we all agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for coming along tonight, and much appreciated you, and all the hard work that's gone in, because I know there's a hell of a lot of hard work that's gone into this document, and I look forward to it in 2020. Yeah? Right, go straight on. Item number 9 is forward finance for information only. I'm hoping I'm going to get the panel's permission here. I decided that because of the importance of these documents, there should only be 2 or 3 things on the agenda, because I know that there was supposed to finish at 8 o'clock at night. So in my ultimate wisdom, I decided that that should happen. But in order to fulfil the rest of the stuff that we've got to do, we're going to have to call another meeting of this panel. And my first suggestion was the 10th of December, but for some reason that did not turn ahead. The other suggestion would be the 19th of December. Does that find the panel's permission to see if we can get through the work that should have been done tonight? But I thought this was very, very important. Any other items? I haven't got anything, but you've been given a briefing note about what the feedback on what happened at Gresham Road. So that's for information only, and so we'll look at that. I'm sure that will come up with some time in the future. And I thank everybody for the positive things that they've been saying tonight. Very positive meeting. Councillor?
At some point we should think about introducing flooding to the work programme, because it's raising up the political agendas, so I'll put that aside. We'll put a work programme suggestion form into that.
You put that form in there, yeah?
No, I'm going to.
Okay then. We shall look at that in the next panel then, yeah? Okay, thank you for your attendance, and
Thank you, Chair.
a good positive meeting tonight.
Is that an email one? Gresham Road.